So let's talk about Google Sheets. It's definitely considered one of the more intimidating of the Google Workspace tools. And so we're going to cover just kind of the basics and throw a few formulas at you and get you started. So your challenge for this particular assignment is to create something original with 5 columns, 2 functions, one instance of data validation and conditional formatting, a little bit of freezing across the top and down the columns, and of course, correct grammar and spelling. So in the past, students have used either fake test scores, maybe they've tabulated orders for a fundraiser, t-shirt orders, or maybe signups for things like CDEs, LDEs, and events. I've had people organize budgets and libraries, and even designing a schedule. So you have to kind of think through an example, either that relates to your personal life or professional. Just go ahead and change any kind of specific identifying information like first and last name. So I'm going to use an example to get us started. So this is my example of some fake test data. And so I'm saying that I have these students, right? And they took a pre-test and a post-test. And in between, I taught them some stuff. So I want to know, did they learn anything? Hence why I'm measuring the gain. Okay, so we're going to take a look, and this is all randomized names and data. None of this is real. So I don't need to go through and change any of these names. So first thing, let's freeze. So I said that you have to freeze the rows and some columns. And the reason for this is so when I scroll, I don't lose that top header row. That if I scroll down 100 kids, I still know what I'm looking at. Same thing with these columns here. I need to be able to see the names throughout the duration of this spreadsheet, no matter how far I scroll in one direction. So to freeze something, we're going to click on View, Freeze, and either you put your cursor where the row where you want to start freezing. I don't want to do that because my cursor right now, or I have the cell 20, like row 20 highlighted, and it would freeze all that data. It'd be a terrible idea. I only want to freeze that top row, so I'm going to select top row. And now I want to freeze these 2 columns so those names don't get lost. So I'm going to click View, Freeze, 2 rows, right? Oops, let me do that again. Notice what I did there. View, Freeze, 2 columns, not rows. And now I can scroll all I like and things look good. I'm not going to lose my data. Now let's talk about some functions. Hopefully I can get through at least one before my video ends. So the first, let's talk about an easy one. I'm going to click in this bottom cell here. So I'm in row 20 here, and notice what my function is. I'm going to average something. So anytime you type in equals up there or in the cell, it's going to then execute a function that comes after that equal sign. I'm saying that I want to average everything between E2 to E19. So we kind of got a battleship thing going here. So I'm going to average everything in between them and hit enter, and then it averages. So I want to know, how did my class score on average for each of these assessments or assignments? So same thing, I can go over here and look at my pretest. I typed equal sign average parentheses D2 through D19 parentheses, and then I hit enter. And that then executed a function on everything between these 2 points, really. And so I don't want to recopy that for all these cells. I'm going to hover over this tiny blue box and drag it to the right, thus copying the formula and applying it to each column thereafter. It even changes the data. So if you look here, it says I2 through I19, H2 through H19. Perfect. So now I would also like to then execute a function that measures gain. Did my students learn anything as a result of my teaching? So I'm going to do some subtracting. I want to know the sum of J2 minus E2. So far we have done averaging, and we've used the sum function. Now with that sum function, by the way, you could do plus, multiply, divide, whatever you wanted. Let's do one more just for variety's sake here. And let's say, assuming all my assignments were worth 10 points apiece, I want Sheets to count the number of times a student scored below a particular benchmark. And let's say, just for example's sake, I want to know how many times did each student earn less than a 5 on any of their assignments. Because I want to track who is scoring the most frequently, kind of at the lower point, just so I can kind of keep track of who needs um, additional support or reteaching or better differentiation or interventions. And so I've got a function here that I wrote. So right here in this box, I want to count the number of low scores. And so then I wrote equal sign, count if certain conditions exist. Parentheses, anything between E2 and J2. So let's see if I got that right. E2, J2, okay, that is correct. Comma, meaning we're switching to now a certain parameter needs to exist for calculations to happen in those columns. So I'm saying anything between E2 and J2, count if it's lower than 5. Okay. And so, and then I hit, I did parentheses, then um, I hit enter. So to close my function here. And so that gave me a score of 0. And I can visually look to see if that's correct. Nobody scored lower than, or I should say, Sandra never scored lower than a 5. So then I'm going to take, hover my cursor here over this blue box, drag it down to apply the formula, let go, right? And then I can verify just to make sure I'm correct. Okay, so Tammy had 3 low scores, meaning she scored lower than 5 at least 3 times. So I can see that there, and there in between this section. So it's working. And that is just one more type of function for you to consider. Let's talk about data validation. I know that's on our to-do list as well. So what data validation does is it requires data to be entered in a certain way. And there's all sorts of things you can do with that. So I'm going to go back over here. So right here, I am assigning a reading level. Again, all randomized data in this example, but I'm going to say that between this section here, I want to do a little data validation. Oops, right here. And so that's under data validation. And I want to pick between a list of items, and that item being below, at, or above reading level. You can do lots of things. You can have it be a certain text. It has to be a number. It has to be a date. It has to be a time. I mean, you can do anything you want, really. But in this particular example, I just want to do a drop-down list. And I'm going to hit save. And so then that requires the user to only select between 3 different choices. This is really handy when people don't spell words right. And I'm not saying my users, let's say my co-teacher couldn't spell this correctly, but if there happens to be a mistyping, then it throws off the data because now we have a 4th choice thrown into that mix. So you want to keep your data as clean as possible, and data validation works really well for that. Let's talk about conditional formatting quick. So what conditional formatting does is says that if certain conditions exist, format the cells this way. So I'm going to go to Format, Conditional Formatting, and check out what I've done. I've added rules. So you're going to click Add Another Rule and design your rules or your conditions accordingly. So we're going to look at one I've already written. So I basically said that anything between E2, right here, and J2 over on the far side, there we go, or J19, I'm sorry. If they're less than or equal to 3, they should be this color, right? And then I replicated that for a couple more sections to try to divide up my colors. So again, conditional formatting divided by score. That way I could visually see who my students of concern are, right? So I can look at that pink and see that I've got some students that I need to worry about here, and some yellows that are on the fringe, and my greens are good to go. All right, so I think I've got everything done on my to-do list. Let's go back to that binder and double check. Original work, 5 columns, 2 functions. I actually showed you 3 functions. So back on that sheet here, and if you ever want to explore more functions, you certainly can. I activated a cell here, and in the top right-hand corner, I'll click the functions button, and there you're going to see plenty of functions for you to explore. To be honest, I often will Google things. So earlier this week, I needed to total up the number of times I clicked a checkbox for each student. I had conditional formatting set up with just checkboxes. And I realized at the end of the semester, I needed to total those up, and I didn't know how to do it. So I Googled, right, how do I total the number of checkboxes in Google Sheet? And Alice Keeler had directions in a blog post for me. Perfect. All right. So don't be afraid to Google or ask me for help. I love solving Google Sheet situations. So I think if I go back here one more time to the binder, I think I got everything else. Conditional formatting, validation, freezing, correct grammar, perfect. All right, so back on this sheet here, you might want to play around with some of the like additional formatting. For example, I clicked the entire row here by activating row 1 and then bolded things and turned the background color, the fill color blue. Once in a while, I'll try merging cells, but I try to be careful with that because when you go to sort things, things kind of get a little wonky. I do like sorting by last name. So I'm going to activate this column, click this drop down arrow here, and then sort sheet A to Z. And that makes it easier when I'm trying to pump things into the gradebook that things match up. And because I froze this top row, it doesn't get sorted. Now, if I try to sort any of these others, like for some reason I wanted to sort intro activity from highest score to lowest, it's going to sort my averages too and then get super messed up, the functional break, because I am messing with the range in which this average would occur. It's not going to work. I'm going to trigger a reference error. Some other things that you can play with is if you activate a cell, you can make things a like a clickable link. And one of my favorite things, I can also tabulate data. So I can grab a chunk of data here. Oh, goodness, let me try that again, and I can insert a chart. So I could go say like this, and I have no idea what this is going to look like, and I can insert a chart. So I'll click insert a chart, and I'm not sure if this is going to look good. Google will try to pick out the appropriate visual. And I don't know. I think I highlighted too much is what I would do different. But I would encourage you to play with this because you might be able to see some trends here in how your students are performing overall, and maybe not highlight so much. But once I had done that, then it inserts this chart, and I could like screenshot this and insert it into a Google slideshow, for example. It's a great way to be able to visualize some data uh, without having to necessarily read your spreadsheet. Definitely should be checking that out too. So I'm going to delete my chart, and you just have to figure out what's the right amount of data to highlight to trigger the chart to look the way you want it to look. Other things like messing around with text rotation, some people really like that. It's not anything that I care about, or in this particular example especially. But I have had students in the past play with that. Same thing with they play with the formatting a little bit. I forgot about this stuff. So if you're using money or you have decimal points showing up, I would encourage you to kind of play with this stuff. And turn things into, like, highlight the whole column and then click the dollar sign to turn it into currency. Same hand, if you're looking for percentages, you might have to tell the column that it's indeed a percent. Like if you had it divide to figure out what the percent score is, you would actually need to highlight that column and tell Sheets that this is indeed a percent. So this column, I will say, or this button here, these series of buttons, is very handy when you're trying to format things appropriately. So that's a crash course in Google Sheets. If you want to learn more, there's a Google Global GEG video that I would encourage you to watch by my buddies Luis and Bonnie. Or you can also find some help from Alice Keeler's got some Google Sheets videos as well floating around on YouTube. And of course, I would encourage you to get Google Level 1 certified, where you will learn a bunch about Google Sheets as well.